give you a little bit of information about myself. I've actually been at KY3 for, in March, it'll be 18 years. Yeah, I'm old. I'll tell you, when I first started there, I did not expect that I would be here that long. Most people that work in television have this thing where they work a couple of years in a market or a city, and then they'll move on. Their idea is to jump to bigger and bigger cities, because typically with that comes more money. Money's not everything, but we kind of grew roots here. The family grew roots here, and we love it. The only place I would actually love to go, at least I think I would, is Denver. Denver is certainly a bigger city. I'm from Colorado. My wife's family is all from Colorado. I grew up most of my life there. Although this might explain a lot. I was born in Arkansas. Okay? I realize that's not too far down the road, but I used to have a really thick Southern accent. In fact, I'd ask my meemaw what time it is. I can't even fake it good now. But born in Arkansas, moved to a suburb of St. Louis for a while, and then ended up from about the age of 7 on living in Colorado. So would love to go to Denver simply to be closer to family. And a few years ago, when my contract was coming up, turns out, and this is a short story, it's a long story, but I'm going to make it short. My wife has a relative. Her grandfather died a couple years ago. We were all there for the funeral. Lo and behold, her cousin happened to be lifelong buddies with a guy that worked at one of the Denver stations. And I'm like, oh, really? He said, yeah, there's actually going to be an opening here soon, and I can put in a word for you. And I'm like, you betcha. So he tells the guy, hey, I know this guy. He lives in Missouri. He's a great guy. And so, yeah, and so he emails me and says, hey, when you're in Denver, look me up. I'm like, I'm going to be in Denver soon. So I went out there. It wasn't a formal interview, but it was kind of weird. And it turns out they don't hire white bald guys. They typically like the more attractive, you know where I'm going with that. That's just the way it is. I'm not an attractive young female, as you might know. That's to say, I don't have any aspirations to jump to bigger cities. With that comes more money, yes, but there's more stress and there's more. You got to drive further to get places, and so the Ozarks is our home. And you know, I really look back to Tom Dye, and I remember working with him, and he was in Springfield for the majority of his career, and of course retired. And I always thought to myself, boy, that must be something. I don't think I'll ever do that. Still never know, but we'll see. I have a beautiful wife, 3 kids. And I told you I was old. We started the family really young. Now the advantage to that is that when all my kids are grown up and out of the house, I'll still be able to do stuff. But my oldest is 18. He'll turn 19 in March, freshman year of college. Lord have mercy. A 15-year-old and a 13-year-old. So they're all boys, which I'm told is easier than girls. I don't know. I'm thinking it's cheaper than girls once it comes to marriage time. But that's my family. I love them dearly. And tell you what, I can't imagine life without them. First of all, several of you have already asked me, between the time I got in the front door, shook a few hands, and got in the meal line, what's the weather going to do? Heck if I know. It's a Saturday night, and I don't care. And it's so in me that I can't help but sit at the computer at home and look at models and, you know, surmise and that type of thing. I have not looked at a whole lot this evening. I can tell you it was icing on me through about Mansfield, and then the temp went to 33, and then 34. I thought, well, that's good, because it is raining harder. And I don't remember saying anything about freezing. So, I think Arkansas is going to get some snow tomorrow, but there are a handful of weatherman jokes that people use. And I literally say a handful because I think everybody thinks they're original, but they're not. For instance, most people will, and I think it's because they really don't know what to say. They think that somehow I'm not a normal person. Like, the one thing you could talk to me about is weather. So they'll say, did you order this? Do you like it? No. Then yes. Or how about some fill in the blank? Or when you gonna make it? Fill in the blank. Listen, if I had a board of switches, I tell you what, it would be a lot more interesting than it is sometimes. But the most common weatherman joke, And I'm going to reenact this as best as I can. Ooh, it's wireless. I'm not one for standing still. And I had to ask Jesus to forgive me later on. But I walked into a convenience store one time. And some people will do this. And it's just a little bit awkward, but sometimes it's funny because in a setting like this I can make fun of them and they don't know it because they're not here. But I'm in a convenience store line, I'm going to pay for my gas, and over here is this good old boy, that's how I'll describe him. His shirt wasn't quite long enough and he had a little bit of skin sticking out there, and he kind of did one of these. He's looking at, he's standing there and I can feel him peering at me. And I'd be honest, look, everybody has bad days, right? I was not having a wonderful day. I was probably slightly irritable. And I don't remember what it was, but this guy finally, he's looking at me and I'm thinking, oh no, what is he going to say? Hey. And I'm thinking, do I respond like I know he's talking to me? So I said, yes. You know, I always wanted to be a weatherman, and I'm thinking to myself, there ain't a chance. And I thought, you know, I might as well take the bait. Why is that? And he says, this is the joke, because I always wanted a job like yours where I could be wrong most of the time and still get paid. So I say to him, and this is why I had to ask Jesus to forgive me, you know, that'd be really funny if it was original. And he just got this glazed look on his face and he turned back and he didn't say another word to me, and I felt bad later. But that really is the common joke. Now listen, you know as well as I do, we're not wrong most of the time. It's like hand grenades, okay? It might be snow or freezing rain or sleet or rain or all the above. But if it did something, we were right. Okay, I'm stretching that a little bit. But we get right most of the time. The problem is the times that we're really wrong. Like, oh my gosh, you're only going to get a couple inches of snow. Thought you said there was going to be only 2 inches of accumulation and we got 12. Well, that happens sometimes. But that's what keeps us humble, I guess. Or something else. But I tell you what, I love my job even though there are those moments. So far this winter, we haven't had any major misses, but we have a month of winter left. And there are 2 storms next week. We'll see how we do. There are also weather teases that the producers, see there's this thing that in the news business we like to do to make you watch longer. They're called teases. So, Saturday Night Live, a number of years ago when the show was actually funny and somewhat clean, did this long skit, and I believe it was, who did it? It was, well, I forget, but the whole point was they made fun of news organizations. The president has died, but the president of what? We'll tell you in 10 minutes. Something like that. So, we know from research that the number one reason people typically watch local news is to get the weather forecast. Okay? So, we like to give you little tidbits in the front end and give you a little cliffhanger to make you want to, oh, I gotta see what he's talking about. So, there are times where a news producer who is responsible for stacking the order of the show and so on will ask me, you know, what do we got coming up? Well, you know, let's say it's a Monday. It's going to be warm today, and then it's going to be kind of windy, but then there's this cold front. Looks like by late week we may get a little bit of snow. So, I'm sitting over there, minding my own business in the Weather Center during the morning show, and I might be typing something or updating the app or the website or blah, 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 and I hear Paul or Maria say, coming up next, Brandon tells us how much snow we're going to get up on Friday, and I'm like, no! Brett! What do you mean, how much snow? You know good well I'm not going to know that until 2 minutes beforehand. But that's how it works. So we make you, oh, it's going to snow. Here's the common reaction. That's not as bad as Atlanta, Georgia. I say snow, you go, ah! It's depending on how long you've lived here. But sometimes it's that bad. Let's see, I'll take you back to 1996. when I graduated from Evangel, it was college, now it's university, I actually started at KY3 in, I guess it was a month, 2 months before I graduated. It was really weird going to the studio on the weekends to do the weather and then coming back to the dorm and having to have them let me in because it was past curfew, because I still had to go back to school. But I tell you, that was, as I look back on that now, and this is sort of how it works in life sometimes, you don't understand how something's working at the time, and then you look back on it and think, oh. Listen, I was nervous for a while in my senior year thinking, oh my gosh, I got to send out tapes. That's when you actually had tapes. And resumes and all that, I don't know how that's going to work. And lo and behold, I get to intern at KY3 with Tom Dye. The rest is history, as the saying goes. So, a retirement happens, Fred Miller retired, and Melissa Ward began doing weekend weather, and then she decided she was going to have a baby, so she was going to move on. All of a sudden there was this opening. And the news director calls me in, and they offer me $19,500 a year. Sure! Now by today's standards, that, you know, I didn't know if that was good or bad or what, but sure, I got a job. And it's not at a little bitty station way off in Timbuktu. And as the years have gone by, Tom Dye retired in 2000. I actually did weekend weather and then did promotions 3 days a week, which was the business of tooting our own horn, essentially, or for nonprofits. So Ron Hurst went to evenings when that happens. He was on the morning show, and then I went to mornings. Now, at the time, it was 6:30 to 7. And that's all there was. We didn't even have a website. Heck, people were still figuring out what the www meant. What would... No, that's not it. And so, you know, with the years, technology has increased, and the show went to an hour and a half, Then it was an hour and a half. Then it was 2 hours. And then what they figured out was, shoot, we can make more money doing news longer than we can for whatever was on before it. So then came the advent of digital TV, and with that, we now have sub-channels. So there's not just KY3, there's 3.1, and then there's 3.2. So then we started an all-weather channel. It was a KY3 24/7, which is still there, which is going to change soon. Not from weather, but just a different format. Oh, you know something most people don't. There'll be $1 at the door when you leave. So then in 2009, I believe it was, KY3 purchased KSBR. We became what is known as a duopoly. So they're at one end of the building, and we're at the other end of the building, and we're still competitors, but yet we're friends. And it's a little bit weird that way, but we all get along fairly well, I think. But with that, now we had another sub-channel. So then we had the CW, Quality Family Programming, not. But so now we do even more news, and the show is now 3 hours. I've always joked with my boss, if you make it 3.5, somebody's going to die. So here's how my typical day goes. I get this question a lot. Well, what time do you have to get up? On an average day, I get up at 2:30. And I do my hair and get to work at 3:30. Do the forecast process, all that kind of stuff. I've got to record radio things that I'm on several different radio stations around, actually out of West Plains and the Thayer area. And then there's some up in Rolla, and there's some down in Mountain Home, and then there's some in Springfield. So I've got to record some of those, ship them out through email. I've got to record some stuff for 24/7, brand some visitor TV, then the show starts. That's 3 hours long. Then I've got to record more stuff for brand. So it's a pretty rapid-fire day from the time I walk in the door until about 8:30. Then I'll eat a bowl of cereal, then I'll answer email, work on whether projects are there. Then the new news comes along, and I'm home by about 1:15 or so. So that I keep my girlish figure 3 days a week. I go work out, and I'm thankful that I have a wife that emphasizes that, because otherwise it would be really easy to say, nope, I'm too tired. And then I'd go, and I'd get bigger. But that's my average day. Now, when we're expecting ice or snow, for instance, Tuesday, Monday, Tuesday, I'll probably get to work at 1:30. That's just how it goes. If you'd like me to call you, leave your number. Guess what, Fred? It's time to get up! It's gonna snow! So that's my normal day. Now, here's some of the interesting things. I think back to when I first started, and we had a computer in the weather office that did our graphics. And I'm thinking back to, you know, how that computer works. There is more power in my Samsung Galaxy than there was in that computer, by probably 4 or 5 times at least, which is amazing. It's also really cool. So now we have all this new technology that has changed really kind of what we do at the base level. Now our computers, our graphics computers, are 16-core processors, and I think they have 32 gigs of RAM. For those that know anything about computers, that's the fastest machine I've ever worked on, and it's really fun to be able to click something, and there it is. Oh, I wish I had one of those at home. Then of course we went from analog to digital. I don't know about the rest of you, but that made me mad for a while. Because it used to be you could at least get the picture in, sort of. Now you either get it or you don't. That was the government's idea, by the way. And then we went to high definition, which is of course the big widescreen. So there have been a lot of changes there, and there are things now that I don't even understand. If you take me back in the equipment room, I don't know. I don't know a few things, but it just keeps getting more and more and more and more technological. KY3 has a huge, rich history, started in 1953. But there are also some challenges that we face, and not just KY3, but as an industry as a whole. Technology with the phones and the tablets. I mean, I've got my notes on an iPad, which is great. But it also presents a challenge because it used to be that the forecasting process or the news gathering process, you pretty much waited until the newscast because people had no other choice but to wait to turn on the TV, watch the news, and get their information. Now they got those things. They want it now. So we had to adapt and not hold back that information, but as soon as we get it, push something off to, you know, the phones and the tablets and whatnot, because if we don't, then our viewers will find a way to get it elsewhere. So we simply had to change the mode of how we do things. Newspapers have had an even worse time of it. A lot of them closed. When the recession hit, there were some that went belly up, and ones that had been there for a long time. Then there's, of course, social media. I have told my boss that social media will be the death of us all. Our insultant, that's actually a consultant. I call him an insultant. He's a nice guy, but anyway. We now have a whole department dedicated to digital. And by digital, I'm talking about website, phone apps, iPad apps, things like that. Because it's not just the younger generation. But do me a favor, raise your hand if you are not on Facebook. More than I expected. The majority of people are. There are some that get on and they go off. Great way to keep in contact with friends. But here's the thing we have learned. KY3.com actually gets more referrals now from Facebook. In other words, people see something on Facebook and click it to come to our website than they do from Google. Just that's how people get information for the weather that way. So we now, in for instance, tornado coverage, have to think about Twitter, Facebook, Twitter, Facebook, Twitter, Facebook. I hate it. But it's a way that people get information. And thus, it is part of our job, it's part of our duties, it's part of how it works now. And so companies are doing that, and that's something that we've had to adjust to. Our website traffic now used to be that with the website, a lot of people gave up. Now that traffic is going down, and mobile over the last couple of years is up over 2,000%. That's why we have a weather app, and we drill it into your heads. Download the KY3, and we edit that. So in the morning, that's part of what I do when I get there, is I edit the numbers in there. We have it broken into zones, so that if your phone's GPS says you're over here, you're going to get a slightly different forecast than you would if you drove to Springfield. And we hope it's a little bit correct. Kidding. And then here's one of the big things that you may have heard about lately when DirecTV dropped the Weather Channel. Retransmission fees. It's an interesting thing where the network used to pay us to air their programming. Now we pay them. And it's a lot of money. I've not actually seen a check, but I'm told it's 7 figures. So, here comes the agreement where you come up to the end of the contract and both sides are kind of putting their heels in and saying, well, I'm not going to pay that much per prescriber or subscriber. And the network says, well, yes, you are. You're not going to air our programs. So it gets into this little battle, and a few years ago, the Fox station, which was KSFX, which was owned by Color 10, Fox and they got into an argument about retransmission fees. Fox said, we're not going to pay that much, and the Fox network said, okay, fine. And they pulled the affiliation to teach everybody else in the country a lesson. You mess with us and we'll pull it. They gave it to a low-power station out of Lake of the Ozarks so that their viewership actually decreased, but they made a statement with it. So that's actually significant cost increase for networks as a whole, and it's part of the challenge that we face. Let me switch gears a little bit and talk about something totally different than television, because most people are identified. I mean, I would dare say that the reason I got invited here to speak is because you recognize me from TV. People understand who I am, and I have this public image. Most of you, your identity is most associated with what you do for a living, or with your business, or with your job. I mean, when you meet somebody new, a lot of times the conversation will turn to, well, what do you do? They don't mean in your spare time. They usually want to know what you do for a living, right? That makes sense because for the most part, that's how we interact with most people on a daily basis. It's through our work. I would submit that that's not actually the most important thing. You're here tonight because of your business. Either you own it or you manage it or you're heavily involved in it, somehow in the community. Not everybody here owns a business. But I would submit to you that it isn't the most important thing that identifies you. In fact, even though it's the most recognized way perhaps, I would say maybe it's one of the least important ways that it identifies you. So I'm a public figure. I've been very blessed to work where I work, for the station that I work for with such a rich history that has the viewership that it does. And you know, I try to strike a balance between when I need to be authoritative and serious on the air, I can be. For instance, tornado coverage, or there's going to be a big storm. But I love to have fun and crack up with my co-anchors and make fun of them as much as possible. We like to do that to each other. And so I think we found kind of a balance between a personality coming through and being the serious person that we need to. So I've been very blessed over the years to win several awards from like the news leader in the 417 magazine as best meteorologist, and that's a viewership poll. First time I won that, I was like, really? I've lost my hair. How does that work? But that's not the most important thing to me. My role at KY3 is not the most important role that I have. It's not the primary thing that determines my identity. And who I am in public is important, but I would say, and this goes for all of us, it's not who I am on TV or who you are in your business, it's who you are when you're not at work. Perhaps more importantly, who I am when no one sees me, not just when the public doesn't see me. A lot of times you'll get people on TV that they strike a nice, they put on the mask and they do their thing, but then you meet them in public and you're like, ugh. I hope that never happens to any of you, although the guy that threw that joke at me may think that, which is why I asked Jesus to forgive me. But here's some questions that I try to ask myself. Am I ethical? Maybe these are questions you should ask yourself. If I'm faced with a situation that I could benefit myself by treating someone else poorly, or doing something that requires just a little bending of the rules perhaps, will I make the right decision? Am I responsible? Can other people count on me to do what they ask me to do or what I say that I'm going to do? How good is my word? Am I compassionate? Can I remember that others have bad days too, and that they might act toward me in a way that isn't quite what I'd like or expect, and then give them grace? Can I remember that no matter how bad my situation is, there are probably a whole lot of people that have it worse? Can I be kind to those people when they don't deserve it? Am I loving? Am I willing to show people around me and love the people around me and perhaps be the difference maker in their day? Or maybe their life? See, the bottom line is you don't know sometimes what kind of an impact you may have on somebody else. You may never know. Am I giving? Do I understand or do you understand that all that you've been given isn't just for you? Am I willing to give up something to help someone else? Whether it be my time, whether it be money, whether it be whatever. You can fill in the blank. You know, you meet some people that it's all about them. And usually you don't like to be around that kind of person. Whereas the opposite is true for somebody who is typically very generous with their time and their resources. Those are the kind of people that are people magnets. Do you put other people before yourself? As business owners or operators, what would you say, and this is just something to think about, what would you say is the #1 goal of your business? If you think about that, probably a common answer would be to make money. Because you can't survive, you can't run your business unless you make a profit, right? That makes sense. But how do you do that? The number one goal is to get customers and keep customers. And you really can't do that unless you have some of those other things going for you. You've heard a lot of people say that customer service is what makes the deal for them. So can you show the love and compassion and the caring? And some of that may seem sort of sappy, but you know what? There are some times you can be having a bad day, you meet somebody that is those things, and it changes your whole perspective. You can make a huge difference in somebody's life. So let's take this a little further then. How many of you would say, yes, I would raise my hand, I would like to trade my family for a successful business? You'd be stupid if you raised your hand. I understand that. But here's the thing. Some people do that without ever realizing. What about your home life? Even if you have a thriving business and you're very successful and you're making money and you're growing, but you put in so many hours that you don't have any hours left to give to your family, well, what does it gain you in the end? Men, do you come home and love on your wives, ask her about her day, engage her in conversation? Or do you crash in front of the TV and expect her to serve you? I've met men like that. Do you help with housework? Okay, I got a side note from the seriousness here for a second. I was helping with the housework today and accidentally dried one of my wife's shirts that I shouldn't have dried. Yeah. I heard her get home. You can't dry this! Ah, snap. It's currently smaller than it was intended to be. Never mind, I'm not going to go there, sorry. But do you make her feel valued, needed, loved, cherished, and one of a kind? Now some of you may start thinking, well, but she doesn't do this and this. I didn't ask you what your wife does for you. Do you make her feel valued? This all does have a purpose, by the way. Wives, do you respect your husbands? From everything I've read, it's actually a man's greatest need, typically, is to feel respected. Didn't say, does he deserve it, or do you think he deserves it? If that's your response, then give it to him anyway. Make him feel needed and important. Tell him what you need and give him a chance to come through. And here's something I really, really, really believe. I believe it, doesn't mean I always do it. I try to do it. But if both husbands and wives would think about their spouse and his or her needs before their own, wow, what a difference that would make. I'd say we'd knock the divorce rate way down if all couples would do that. And what about kids? You get a chance, and one chance, to raise them. Time flies by and then they're gone. I'm thinking in my own life right now, I've got about 5 years left, and they're all gone. Now I have met, in fact I'm good friends with a couple that they can't wait. They're counting it down till the kids are gone. I guess I'm sort of feminine, and when I say that, my wife is dreading a moment where we're empty nesters, and I don't know that I disagree with her. I mean, there are moments. The kids drive me nuts. But I've got 5 years, and look, you got one chance. So is your business keeping you so busy that you don't have time for them? Are you available to talk? If they're younger, do you get down on the floor and play with them? Do you help with homework? Do you show an interest in them and what they're interested in? See, a relationship takes effort. Almost anyone, if you're always working, or watching sports or playing golf, you're sending a message, essentially, that says that those things are more important than your son or daughter. And that will hang with them the rest of their lives. I speak from experience. Daughters need to know that they're beautiful and special and worth pursuing. Sons need to know that you're proud of them and that they have what it takes to be a man or become a man. Your kid needs to know that they're special and that you believe in them. You've got to be available, involved, and love them on purpose. Raising confident, successful, well-rounded kids takes more than making a good living or having a successful business. You can do both, but it takes setting priorities, being intentional, and sometimes saying no to things. And finally, what about God? How does he play into all of this? Now, I realize that this isn't a church service. We aren't a church. But my intention is not to preach a sermon at you. Some of you perhaps have no context when it comes to God, other than to say, well, yes, he exists, but that's as far as your belief goes. Maybe some of you don't even believe that. There are some people, I work with one in particular, that say religion is a crutch for the weak-minded. So given the broadness of the ideas and the backgrounds that may be in this room, I'm not going to go into what I think God should be to you, but instead, I'll tell you what he is to me. Religion is, for the most part, a lot of tradition that men and women have added to the gospel message over the years. It's a list of rules and regulations and ceremonies and do's and don'ts and expectations and standards. Not all of them are bad, but I'm talking about something different. Religion, or even going to church, often becomes part of a to-do list. It's just something we do because we've always done it, or we were raised that way, our parents did it, so we're going to do it, it's the right thing to do, what have you. But a relationship with God is central to every other part of life. It's a growing understanding that goes from God is real to God loves me to I know God and he is my friend. It's the faith that believes I am not just a number among the vast millions that claim some sort of faith in a higher power, but a faith that says, like it does in 1 John 3, that the Father has lavished such love on us that we could be called children of God. And that because we're his children, God has put his Spirit. The Spirit, it says, and I'm thinking it's this in Galatians, and forgive me for not remembering the exact reference, but it says that because we are children of God, God puts the Spirit of his Son into our hearts, the Spirit that cries out, Abba, which is most closely translated in our language, Daddy. Now, for a lot of you, that's really weird. Because a lot of us are raised in a very traditional church background when making that personal reflection to God seems completely irreverent. Wait, what? Daddy? But that's what Scripture says. And so for me, even being a public figure, that's not something I'm ashamed to say. It is life-changing for me. And I would submit to you that as business owners and community members, that is first and foremost the most important relationship that you could possibly have. Because then everything else works around that. And the Heavenly Father supplies every need that you may have. And then what matters to you matters to him, including your business. Thank you so much for inviting me tonight. I really appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you. And I think we only have 47 days till spring.